Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this webinar on nature-led master planning and placemaking, delivered by myself, Ross at Green Urbanist, and Prachi and Soham from EcoResponsive Environments. We've had over 150 people register to join today from around the world, and I think this speaks to how important and timely this topic is. Thank you all so much for joining. Now, in the UK, we have an acute housing shortage, and the government is promising hundreds of thousands of new homes through new towns and communities. And this pressure we know is being felt in countries and cities around the world too. At the same time, there's no doubt that we are all living in a climate and biodiversity crisis. It's clear now that the places that we deliver today must be not only low carbon and resource efficient, but also nature positive and resilient to climate change. The vast majority of us working in the built environment fields have not been formally trained to tackle these issues in a holistic way. And so this is also a moment to rethink our own design practice and fill the gaps in our knowledge so that we can deliver places fit for the 21st century. That's where eco-responsive design comes in. As Soham and Prachi put it, eco-responsive design aims to address the challenges of the Anthropocene age at the project scale. And today we'll be sharing an overview of this framework in the hope that it inspires you to integrate nature-led principles into your design practice as well. Here's an overview of the next hour. We'll tell you a bit about ourselves, and then we'll introduce the key elements of the framework, followed by a case study of eco-responsive design applied to a real master planning context. We'll end the presentation by summarizing the step-by-step design process. And for those of you interested in going deeper, we'll share some details on our upcoming course on eco-responsive design. Now, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Ross O'Kelly. I am a multidisciplinary urban designer and sustainability educator. I run a podcast called The Green Urbanist, and I've been working with many local authorities on spatial strategy and training. For the last couple of years, I've been very much focused on helping built environment professionals to upskill in sustainable planning and design. Delighted to be running this webinar with Prachi and Soham from EcoResponsive Environments, who I'll now pass over to so they can introduce themselves.
So myself, Soham, and Prachi, we are both co-founders and directors of an award-winning urban design and architectural practice based in London. Our services include master planning, visioning, development briefs, outline and detail planning applications, public realm and town center regeneration strategy making, research publications, and teaching. As Ross introduced, we are here today to talk about nature-led master planning in practice, rooted in our recently published book, EcoResponsive Environments. Now, jumping on to our introduction on our book. As the title suggests, this is a practical book about designing the built environment at all scales, from building to the overall form of settlements. We call it a framework instead of a manual or a guidebook, because the book presents a set of ideas based on empirical research that provides support to solve or respond to current challenges of built environment that we are all facing across the world. Settlement design is an interdisciplinary subject that intersects with various fields such as urban planning, architecture, environmental science, sociology, and economics, amongst others. Its impact extends to everyone, making it a complex, multifaceted subject. Therefore, it requires a comprehensive understanding of how these different disciplines interact and influence each other. That's why we've tried to put together a set of ideas that draws from various professional fields and the available extensive literature on sustainable and regenerative design in the manner of theory of everything, if you like. The idea was to provide a unified framework that combines multiple disciplines into a single comprehensive understanding, and with collaboration and practical application on design projects, we see it growing and evolving. The process of its thinking started about 14 years ago. We saw there was a clear divide or a gap in both practice and academia between the discipline of landscape ecology and the rest of built environment. To put it simply, thinking of humans and nature as somewhat being separate. So building on its predecessor, the seminal Responsive Environments, published in 1985, those who know about that. But this book, EcoResponsive Environments, focuses on how to reintegrate human and natural systems through design practice. It outlines a framework for creating conditions favorable for a greener, eco-friendly world, otherwise known as being sustainable in popular culture. As we move forward, we are realizing that the gaps between the professional boundaries are getting broader and deeper. This mostly happens because of our ever increasing complexity in the context of rapid globalization that creates endemic problems of information overload. And to cope with this, any particular designer is driven to take a specialized focus. And due to such hard boundaries, we get so caught up in our own work that we miss how it connects with what others are doing. But the truth is, our work often spills over into the work of other designers, even those working on completely different disciplines. This lack of interdisciplinary understanding means that designers of all kinds face the risk of making well-meant decisions that generate infinitely widening chain of unintended consequences. This gets exacerbated by the ever-increasing scale and speed of urban change, driven by human actions, which mark our new Anthropocene age. Therefore, we felt the need to adopt a more integrated and inclusive way of thinking about the relationships between human and the rest of the natural world in order to minimize such unintended consequences through design in the Anthropocene world. And thus was the inception of eco-responsive environments. To create an inclusive framework for design, it is important to establish common ground between all stakeholders of the built environment. What essentially the framework suggests that we make design decisions for a safe and just space that provide fundamental needs of all humans within means of the planet. This is the space in which the book's framework operates. It addresses the Anthropocene's ever-changing economic and environmental conditions by developing a design approach that is responsive to human needs whilst ensuring long-term support from our planet's life support systems. We call this approach eco-responsive design. To enable this in practice, eco-responsive design approach embraces a complex systems thinking, which means there are things within things within things and are also interconnected. This kind of thinking is more prevalent in other fields of knowledge like economics, sociology, medicine, etc., but also in landscape and ecology, which we heavily draw from. In complex systems, relationships between elements, things, or objects matter more than those objects or things themselves in isolation. And like many other systems, settlements are also such complex systems. This means that instead of thinking about settlements as one large thing, we need to think about it as relationships between different subsystems. So therefore, we start with land and topography, without which you can't have any settlement. The land has water system and green system, and they change at different rates, rather very slowly. Then we have the public space system, without which we can't get from one place to another. And once laid out, the street network also cannot be altered significantly very easily. Then we have the plot system. Although they may last for centuries, they are comparatively more faster changing than the natural infrastructure or street networks. On top of plots sits the building system, which is rather short-lived in comparison to other layers. In summary, the four key subsystems of settlement, namely natural infrastructure, public space, plots, and buildings, are not just things or objects, but layers that are interconnected and interact with each other. This means the change in one of these layers will affect or trigger change in others. These subsystems, however, are also multiscalar. For example, the public space system is made up of streets and other public open spaces, which are in turn made up of ground surface, trees, bollards, etc., which are in turn made up of materials and textures and so on. These smaller elements typically change faster than the larger systems they constitute. For example, the trees and plants of natural infrastructure change much faster than the underlying landform, whilst the internal layouts of buildings, windows, doorknobs typically change faster than the overall building structures. Therefore, design decisions of the longer lasting layers or the deeper layers need to fixed at the earliest possible stage to set the stage right for the faster changing layers that constitute what we call the surface order of places. Otherwise, it risks settlements suffering from inherited fundamental challenges which are rather irreversible. This essentially generated our methodology for how to understand and design settlements, resulting in our chapter structure. Chapter 1 starts at the largest scale, developing a framework for creating natural infrastructure by drawing out maximum affordances from the site's natural capital. Chapters 2, 3, and 4 then weave in the public space network, link in the plot structure, and integrate the build form. Chapter 5, however, is slightly different to the rest as it explores the implications of decisions made in chapters 1 to 4 for multisensory experience. Adopting a transdisciplinary design approach, each chapter summarizes relational parameters that enable to create design decisions in varied local situations and generate positive synergies across as many subsystems as possible. We call these synergic or impact parameters. The book introduces these design parameters at crucial points within each chapter, serving as spatial design principles to shape our built environment. Many of these design parameters, in essence, are transferable across all cultures.
So, in the slides that follow, we will use our recent award-winning master plan project, the Heath Park Master Plan. It got unanimous outline planning in 2024 summer as an example of how we have implemented the eco-responsive design approach in practice. So as an introduction to the project and the site, Heath Park was once the headquarters of ICI in a town called Runcorn near Liverpool. But before we came on the scene on the project as master planners and architects, our clients, the SOG group, had already developed the site from a single occupancy site into one of Britain's leading business and technical parks, with about 120 scientific research and development businesses, with their corporate facilities increasingly being linked into local communities. Now, SOG wanted a new future for Heath Park. It wanted Heath Park to move forward as a beacon of innovation, health and well-being, inspiring climate-appropriate ways of addressing Runcorn's serious health and deprivation issues such as obesity, access to nature, car dependency, and loneliness. And so to show a realistic way forward, as a design team, we had to balance the project's long-term economic, social, and ecological beacon values against shorter-term financial ones. Our design team evolved this balance in close collaboration with the client and with the regional and local authorities. More locally, an interactive Heath Live website engaged with local residents and businesses. And so the following slides, going layer by layer, we will outline the project's eco-responsive approach and a wider reimagination agenda for nature-led master planning to secure resilience and sustainability through design. So as step 1, we go into coupling with natural infrastructure. So starting with the landform and the water system. The project proposes a gravity-fed circular water system that minimizes our demand for external systems of supply and treatment whilst maximizing biodiversity and amenity value. The Heath Park circular approach helps minimize dependency by at least 70% on the local mains water supply. How do we do that? Surface runoff is minimized with green roofs and permeable pavements, and drainage from roads and parking areas are captured by swales and rain gardens, creating a nature-rich environment that capitalizes on the placemaking role of sustainable urban drainage. Pushing boundaries further for innovation, we have grey and black water from buildings that is treated on site through a constructed wetland that recycles treated effluent and has potentials to double up as an environmental learning centre. The landscape system, or the green network, integrates a variety of new ecologically rich productive spaces connected through tree-lined streets and courtyard gardens with a wider existing framework of nature reserves, sports pitches, and traditional parkland to create an extensive park system across and beyond the site. The green desert of a national grid that runs through the site, the easement for the national grid, then becomes a 500-meter-long wildflower meadow ride that offers an extensive natural corridor for pollinators. Analysis by Liverpool John Moores University using their natural capital accounting framework assesses the proposal as net positive in terms of 6 key ecosystem service indicators. Moving on to step 2, linking in public space. In terms of the movement system and access into the site, Heath Park is well connected internationally, nationally, and regionally. But as you see in your top left space syntax analysis diagrams, where hotter color indicate the most connected streets, it reveals a coarse, disconnected pattern of local connectivity, which imposes car dependency even for short journeys. And so we reimagine the system to support walking, healthy walking and cycling for local travel with a fine-grained connected street layout stitching into the wider context. On to step 3, the plot structure. We maximize our land use system's social and financial value by locating activities to take advantage of the street connectivity, as well as the therapeutic value of natural infrastructure and to build relationships with the wider local communities. And so the project's phasing strategy that supports 500 plus homes, about 220,000 plus square feet of office spaces, and so on, enhances the commercial and social offer from day one and enables existing facilities to continue operation throughout construction so existing communities can grow together with newcomers around jobs, housing, leisure, health, and green opportunities. In order to enable vibrant and convivial places, plots form fine-grained mixed-use perimeter blocks with a mix of tenures, frequent street entrances, and private back gardens that also enclose potentials for resident-only communal spaces that foster unsupervised play and intergenerational living. To build social efficacy that stems from relationships beyond the family, these communal spaces include community kitchens, they can include tool sheds, allotments, area for relaxation, leisure, so quite kind of multifunctional. And so for the Heath Park Master Plan, there were 3 scales of social interaction that were integrated and weaved. The first was private, second communal, and third public, each with a specific purpose and defined spaces. Moving to step 4, which is about integrating townscape and buildings. Now, as a practice, as a design practice, we are committed to the idea of slow architecture. And by that, we mean the creation of adaptable buildings that remain useful through rapid cycles of social and economic change. And so following this approach, the existing buildings on the Heath Park site, with their concrete frame structures and 12-meter deep floor plates, they supported a retro-first approach, reused as affordable live-work units and or office or lab spaces for existing businesses. Housing, whether new build or repurposed, is designed to address today's tide of social isolation put in stark focus during COVID. And so multi-focused living spaces incorporate smaller scale nooks, bays, and window seats to balance individual privacy with family togetherness. Heath Park's utilities and infrastructure system responds to climate crisis and environmental degradation at 3 scales: the site scale, the cluster scale, and the building scale. At the site and cluster scales, regenerative microgrids of renewable energy, water, and waste maximize energy efficiency and share resources amongst diverse uses accommodating within buildings. And all new residential is aimed to be net zero carbon, with existing buildings having potentials to be upgraded to highest levels of energy efficiency using locally sourced natural materials with timber frame structure and modular components designed for easy disassembly and reuse. A fabric-first building skin approach is adopted to design in tune with nature's circadian cycles, which enhances occupants' health and minimizes service bills for the residents. And together they enable Heath Park's residents to live, work, and play towards a net zero future. At a more perceptual level, we learn from the human affinity to the therapeutic effects of nature, more commonly known as biophilia, by building in the fractal organization that's typical of natural systems. I.e., we see increasing level of detail as we approach surfaces closely. And so we draw from this attunement with nature's scalar structure to reimagine the aesthetics of buildings and public spaces using sustainable materials and today's technology. So we can experience townscapes at different scales and at different distances. So in conclusion, our complex systems approach empowered us to identify reimagination agenda for healthy placemaking, nature-led placemaking across a range of scales. It did make us confront head-on with the question of how can we make the most sustainable option also the most viable one. And the 3 key lessons we learned through this project, first was the importance of a holistic design brief, which came largely from the client. Second, the value of an integrated and holistic design process rooted in project management, which is kind of quite akin to orchestrating a symphony. And thirdly, the power of evidence-rooted storytelling. I.e., yes, of course, the design process has to be backed up by evidence, but evidence alone is not enough. As environmental communications specialist George Marshall explains, people may read information in the form of data and figures, but their beliefs about it are held entirely in the form of stories. And that's because stories form a fundamental cognitive function. They are the means by which our emotional brain makes sense of our rational brain. And so it does mean that nature-led master planning must embrace a compelling storytelling ability that builds the master plan layer by layer, helping us replace and foster the agenda of design that is rooted in a deeper understanding of natural systems. And so in conclusion, the key eco-responsive takeaways and a snapshot of our step-by-step design process. Firstly, all design decisions must respond to human needs, but rooted in a deeper understanding of natural systems. Secondly, the impact of our design decisions in reality go far beyond the site's red line boundary. And so we must integrate as part of the design process, both the local and the global scale or the wider context we are operating in when designing. And this can only be achieved through a holistic and integrated, a structured design process that cuts across all the all the four key subsystems that constitute any place. And so the eco-responsive design methodology is structured around four basic subsystems of any settlement. So step one is about creating highly connected natural infrastructure. Step two relates step one with a focus on linking in streets and public networks. Step three delves into how we locate land use and density whilst embracing a landscape integrated approach. And step four is about using built form to create legible and locally distinctive townscapes.